Hello, everyone. This is Ronnie Bincer, the Hangout Helper. We are doing a series of interviews, so if you haven't seen the others, you want to check them out as well, about how chefs are using Hangouts and Hangouts on Air to cook online and get other people involved with the things that they're doing. We've got Jake Croston here. And Jake, could you tell us how you're currently using or how you've been using Hangouts in the past to do some of your cooking endeavors?
Well, I've always been a fan of it ever since the inception of Google Plus and the Hangout Experience. Um, it's been a very interesting and enjoyable endeavor, just because you get to see people's reactions. I said one of my coolest stories is I got to make um, Mexican food with a guy that lives in Denver, and his friend is in Amsterdam, and I live in Pennsylvania. So we were cooking Mexican food across 2 continents in 3 time zones.
That's really
And
cool.
yeah. So that experience has been neat, and being able to talk and connect with people while I'm doing something and they're learning something. And it's a definite a new experience for most people. I'm used to it now, but to see people's reactions of, oh wow, I'm watching this live. I don't. It's a two-way communication, and people aren't used to learning that way. At least not through online interaction. So
Right. So so when you're doing these cooking shows, are there people in the film strip, meaning they're actually part of this hangout? They're not just necessarily watching it like a TV show, but they're actually interacting with you live?
yeah, most of the time, the ones that I have done, I've done the Hangouts on air a couple times too for some Google sponsored events. But most of mine have been live with the people in the actual Hangout.
Cool. Okay, so let me ask. There's a couple of standard questions I've been asking all the chefs. Let me go through those, and then we can chat about some additional ones. So the next one is technologically challenging. I know
Hmm.
it's a sometimes it changes frequently, and it's hard to keep up. But that's why I'm around. But the key is, have you run into technological challenges when you're trying to do these hangout shows, as well as emotional? Have you ever run into an emotional block or something like that when you're doing a show?
Um, Technological, yes, for sure. A lot of times, everything seems fine and everything's running smooth, and then all of a sudden everybody drops out, or you drop out, and people are trying to get back in, and so that makes it, a challenge sometimes. The sound sometimes is, with microphones and echoes and all that stuff.
Right.
Um, so that happens not all the time. Sometimes you'll run through a whole thing and it's perfectly smooth and everybody's happy.
Mhm.
As far as emotionally goes, I'd say one of the hardest things has been running into people who don't want to be on camera. Um, it's when you're trying to teach a class or lead a class and people are don't want to be seen. It's hard to read without seeing their face or having them look at something. If I'm holding a plate up to the camera and I don't know if they're seeing it or not, if the angle's good, what it looks like. So I'd say as far as emotionally, I'd say it's just connecting with people, especially that don't want to appear on camera,
Okay.
because it's hard to read, their reaction and adjust accordingly into what I'm going to be doing next.
Right. So if you're actually doing a show, and that's not even necessarily just as a show, that's just in a regular hangout where you're not even
Right.
broadcasting. You might run into that,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you do anything that's kind of runs right into the next question is, do you do anything to help the guests, what I call the film strip guests, the people that are part of this hangout? Do
Hmm.
you do anything to help them get comfortable in front of a camera, or how do you handle that?
Um, I usually try to keep things pretty light, keep things pretty jovial, and make jokes and um, make people not feel so nervous. The more people there are in the hangout, the better it is,
Hmm.
because then they see, there's a bunch of people that they don't know, and those people don't necessarily know each other either. So, um, but to ask them questions, that's one of the biggest things is to just keep talking to them and keep trying to draw them out. And uh, by the end, usually they are into it and laughing and
Right. So you've seen the transition emotionally from the beginning to the end. It's like this is the magic when I say the technology disappears, and now you're just in a conversation.
Right.
that works
Right.
out eventually.
They forget that what they're doing is something that they were scared of 20 minutes ago.
Right, right. And you know
Yeah.
what I find, and I don't know if you've ever tried this, but some of the silly hats and the goggles,
Yes.
this is
They
one of
they
the
diffuse yeah they diffuse a situation very quickly if it seems a little bit too stuffy.
right. I've seen some people really actually quite upset about the fact that that's part of the tool set, and I'm like, no, no, this is great because people turn them on, and it's like they're looking at the hat and they're trying a different. Now they got a cat face on, and all of
Uh
a sudden they're not so worried about the fact they're on the camera anymore.
Right, the anxiety. And actually, you know what? I have a good friend on Google Plus who she didn't want to come onto a Hangout, and it was right when they introduced some of those tools, and that's what she did. She put like a Santa hat on or a mask on, and she was fine.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So I've found that to actually be one of the best tools for disarming concerns emotionally about being on a camera,
right.
honestly. Okay, so another question specifically about cooking now. Do you find that any types of food work better when you're doing hangout cooking endeavors versus another, and especially when it ties into preparing for the show?
Um, that is probably one of the biggest things to take into account is what you're making to make it compatible with the Hangout format. Um, because I could sit here and cook something for 2 hours, but am I going to engage with people for 2 hours? Probably not. So I usually have to do, and it depends on the format of the show. If I'm trying to show people techniques and skills, then I want them to see me how to cut onions, how to cut peppers and carrots and that kind of stuff.
Right.
That's a part of the process, the learning process. If it's just more of a 15-minute hangout where I just want to show the finished product, then everything's got to be prepped and ready to go, and just the live cooking has to happen.
So
So it,
that brings right into the next sort of the last canned question per se. Do you,
okay.
I'm gonna guess that you are a proponent of the idea of having food in various stages so that you're able to efficiently and quickly show this is what it was like at the very beginning,
Right.
and then here's a midway, and here's our final just about to come out of the oven kind of thing. Is that something that you do?
Yeah, I've done. I tried to do one called raw to ready in 15 minutes, and that was really tough. I mean, I didn't get it done in 15 minutes.
Oh yeah.
So that was a learning experience. And then
Which
I've
probably
also
works
done
fine in 15 minutes when you're just doing it on your own, but not when you're in the middle of a hangout,
talking
right?
and yeah, and demonstrating, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So I've done the cooking show style thing where I prep the entire thing and then just magically pull it out of the oven at the end because this is this first batch I already made, and this is what it's supposed to look like at the end.
Hmm.
So sometimes I find that works quite well with the Hangout format, especially on air, because people want to see what it looks like at the end. People want to see the finished product. So
Right. That am I dating myself if I say I call that the Julia Child technique?
no, that's very well respected, and yeah,
Okay.
that's the industry standard right there.
Right. So see, so you really with this tool you have the ability, if you were to utilize it, to have your own cooking network. Honestly, you can build lots of concepts around different things. Like if you wanted to just have a whole series on how to prep, right? That's all you would need to do. You prep
Yep.
foods, and then you can talk about recipes and things like that afterwards. Are there other ideas like that that you've run into that you felt were awesome, but you just never had the time to do?
Oh man, the ideas for food, they're just infinite. Something that just kind of popped into my head was, you know, if you wanted to do like a cheese course and, show people what kinds of cheese go with what, how to cut it, how to prepare it, for, and then grab 3 or 4 wines that they could pair with some of the cheeses, or
Hmm.
something of that nature would be really neat. Even just a wine tasting course, or uh, it's basically limited by the imagination
Imagination, yeah.
and time constraints and imagination.
Right, and yeah, because we're doing this as part of a whole campaign for bringing the focus to crafty cooking. That's part of the terminology that we're trying to bring into the conversation is how do you
Right.
get crafty? And it ties in, of course, with craft foods. That's on purpose, but it's also the concept of being crafty in the way you do your cooking.
Right.
So,
Um,
Yeah, cheese. Yeah, cheese is good.
Yes, cheese is very good. I've had an abundance in the last week. So.
Do you find there's certain cheeses that you will have one time a year over another?
Um, I'm always just a huge fan of sharp cheddar. That's like
Mhm.
my go-to.
So Cracker, do you ever use Cracker Barrel? Is that a brand that you do, or
Yeah, that was always one of my favorites, and it's nice and conveniently shaped.
yes.
It really is. It's like the perfect cracker shape, and
Right, right.
I like the white. I think the white Vermont cheddar or the sharp New York cheddar. I forget which. Either one, but I like that bite and that
Right.
just the ton of flavor. So um, I also like to use uh, whenever I'm making macaroni and cheese. Um, I have four different cheeses that I use, and they all serve a different purpose. So one is to build flavor, one is to provide stability, one is to provide texture, and the other one is for depth.
Did you
So
say depth?
depth, yes, depth of flavor,
Depth of flavor. Can you define
yes.
that?
So that the first bite isn't necessarily the best.
Uh,
That as you start to chew it, the nuances of whatever cheese is in there isn't doesn't hit you right away. And what I use is usually grated Parmesan for that because it provides, instead of using salt, I use grated Parmesan, and that provides that depth and that extra little bit of flavor that's in the back of your mouth and not so much right when you take a bite.
it's
So,
kind of like with certain hot sauces that initially start to grow, and
right.
that's where you're talking about depth.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
Cool.
So.
All right. Well, thanks. This has been good. We're going to do a live show where we'll continue our conversation because this is part of a campaign where we're building multiple parts and putting them together and actually trying to provide depth for a an online campaign with Crafty Cooking. So
Yes.
that's coming up on the 8th of January, and I sure hope you'll be able to join us live. That
Yeah.
is something you're going to be able to be part of, right?
Yes. For sure.
Fantastic. And the specific details of what we're going to be discussing, you'll just have to come and see. So good. All right. Well, thanks for being part of the process here, Jake, and we really appreciate you being part of it. And we will see everybody soon. And make sure you check out some of the other interviews that we're doing with the other chefs involving cooking, crafty cooking, and Hangouts on Air specifically. Thank you, guys.